Hello, buddy. All right, so welcome to the Mikestand. I hope everybody's having a good week thus far. Today is Tuesday, September the 24th. Of course, you guys can help out by liking and, if you haven't already, you guys can like and share the stream, see if we get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything we talk about tonight grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. With that, we're gonna give it a few minutes before I talk about what's on tap for tonight. As we are gonna have what you might say is a special edition tonight, and I'll talk about that in maybe about a couple minutes or so here. Just want to give people a chance to come in, get settled in, and all that. So, anyways. Um, La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Let's see. What else? Underdog, 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 underdog. Let's see. Overtures, cut the lights. This is it, the night of nights. No more rehearsing or nursing our part. We know every part by heart. On with the show, this is it. See. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. I'm strong to the finish 'cause I eat my spinach. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. Let's see. What else? Let's see. Casper, the friendly ghost, the friendliest ghost you know. He dances and plays, sings, dance all day. All right, so we're just past the 3 minute mark now. So here's what's on tap for tonight. So tonight, on this special edition of the Mikestand, we're going to look back to the history of United Productions of America, better known to most people as UPA. Of course, that's the animation studio that gave us such characters as the nearsighted Mr. Magoo, who was, of course, famously voiced by the late great Jim Backus, Gerald McBoing Boing, as well as Fox and Crow, among other characters. So we're gonna, look through the history of that company, talk about some of the characters and some of the stuff. Hey, Rick, thanks for popping in, my friend. Hey, all. All right. Plus, of course, we'll have the rest and wrap up and this day in each history. So, without any further ado, now we do have some people here. Let's see. Animal Crossing animated movie 2001. Never heard of it. Let's see. Dylan Piper. All right. Oh, with that being said, why don't we go ahead and get started then? Alrighty then. So, United Productions of America, better known as UPA, was an American animation studio and later distribution company founded in 1941 as Industrial Film and Poster Service by former Walt Disney Productions employees. Beginning with industrial and World War II training films. UPA eventually produced theatrical shorts for Columbia Pictures, such as the Mr. Magoo series, a nearsighted, nearsighted Mr. Magoo. I'm sure some of you around Christmas time have seen Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, among other things. You'll probably be surprised to find out what some of the other stuff that they were involved in as well. Let's see. In 1956, UPA produced a television series for CBS, the Boing Boing Show, hosted by Gerald McBoing Boing. In the 1960s, UPA produced syndicated Mr. Magoo and Dick Tracy television series, and other series and specials, including Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol. UPA's also produced, which came out in 1962, by the way, produced 2 animated features, 1001 Arabian Nights and Gay Paris. And I remember growing up watching that on the weekend, sometimes when they throw that on. Gay Paris followed, of course, John Tom and Robespierre and Mazette, I believe. Basically about alley cats in France. Gay Paris, basically the whole idea of kind of a play on the phrase Gay Paris, of course, meaning happy in this case. And distributed Japanese films from Toho Studios in the 1970s and 80s. Universal Pictures currently owns the majority of the UPA library after their acquisition of DreamWorks Animation in 2016. The theatrical shorts, which were released by Columbia Pictures, are still owned by that studio. So basically, the theatrical shorts you can still find, if you have here in the States on MeTV Tunes. Of course, they have the show Totally Tuned In, which has a lot of Columbia Pictures Screen Gems stuff there. So now with the basics out of the way, let's get into the history of it. See if you guys are saying anything about the stuff so far. Nope. All right. So with that, let's continue on. So. Alrighty then. All right, so now we get on to the history of UPA, the origins. UPA was founded in the wake of the Disney animator strike of 1941, so just around the time just before, I guess, World War II came about, which resulted in the exodus of a number of longtime Walt Disney Animation Studios staff members. Among them was John Hubley, a layout artist who was unhappy with the ultra-realistic style of animation that Disney had been utilizing. Along with a number of his colleagues, Hubley believed that animation did not have to be painstakingly realistic imitation of real life. They felt that the medium of animation had been constrained by efforts to depict cinematic reality. Chuck Jones' 1942 cartoon, The Dover Boys, which was, of course, a Warner Brothers production, and that's had a few different titles. The Dover Boys of Rockford, all that, had demonstrated that animation could freely experiment with character design, depth, and perspective to create a stylized artistic vision appropriate to the subject matter. Hubley, Bob Cannon, and others at UPA sought to produce animated films with sufficient freedom to express design ideas, considered radical by other established studios. Of course, the other established studios of the time, of course, were Disney, Warner Brothers, MGM, Paramount, famous studio, you get the idea. Hmm. So in 1941, Zach Schwartz, David Hilberman, and Stephen Bosutto, uh, let's see, formed a studio called FIR, Industrial Film and Poster Service, where they were free to apply their new techniques in film animation, finding work and income, in parentheses there, in the then booming field of wartime work for the government. The small studio produced a cartoon sponsored by the United Auto Workers in 1944, uh, Hellbent for Election. Hellbent for Election was directed by Chuck Jones, was produced for the re-election campaign of FDR. The film was a success, and it led to another assignment from the UAW, Brotherhood of Man. The film, directed by Bob Cannon, advocated tolerance of all people. Now, of course, at the time there was there was kind of a heightened, it wasn't just, of course, the normal racism we had, or the racism, the color racism we had, but we, also there are people in parts of the country that were pretty suspicious of the Jewish immigrants as well, coming out of Europe as well as, of course, the Japanese after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans. The short was innovative not only in its message, but in its very flat, stylized design, in complete defiance of the Disney approach. With its newfound status, the studio renamed itself United Productions of America. Initially, UPA contracted with the United States government to produce its animation output, but the government contracts began to evaporate as the FBI began investigating communist activities in Hollywood in the late 1940s. No formal charges were filed against anyone at UPA in the beginnings of McCarthyism, but the government contracts were lost as Washington severed its ties with Hollywood. Yeah. As the 1940s were coming to an end, and as McCarthyism was starting to rise, of course, they didn't want to have anything to do with people they thought may have been in league with those who would turn on the country. Columbia Pictures and success. UPA entered the crowded field of theatrical cartoons to sustain itself and gained a contract with Columbia Pictures. Now, Columbia Pictures, prior to this, of course, prior to associating itself with UPA, had previously contracted out with Charles Mintz Studios in the 30s and 40s, giving us, of course, like Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, Crazy Cat, Farmer Alfalfa, Color Rhapsodies. So to give you guys kind of an idea of material that they were using before. Let's see. Columba had historically been and also ran in the field of animated shorts. And it was not satisfied with the output of its Screen Gems cartoon studio. Screen Gems, of course, which would be kind of a branch of Columbia that would handle like not just their animation, but later on when television became a thing, their television arm as well. You probably remember, like I Dream of Jeannie, for example, was done through the Screen Gems banner. The UVA animators applied their stylistic concepts and storytelling to Columbia's characters, the Fox and the Crow, with the shorts Robin Hoodlum, 1948, and The Magic Flute, 1949, both directed by Hubley. Both were nominated for Academy Awards, and Columbia granted the studio permission to create its own new characters. The UPA responded not with another funny animal, but a star that was a human character, a crotchety, nearsighted old man. The Ragtime Bear, 1949, the first appearance of Mr. Magoo, was a box office hit, and UPA's star quickly rose as the 1950s dawned. Mr. Magoo, who was voiced by the late great Jim Backus, who would of course later portray Thurston Howell III in on Gilligan's Island, opposite Marilyn Schaefer, or Natalie Schaefer's Mrs. Howe, as it were, on that show. Let's see, or Lovely Howe, as she was known. With a unique, sparse drawing style that contrasted greatly with other cartoons of the day, not to mention the novelty of a human character in a field crowded with talking cats, mice, and rabbits. Tom and Jerry, Bugs Bunny, Herman and Catnip. Yeah, I mean the only other like quote unquote human characters we could probably think of that would rival that, of course, would be Popeye the Sailor, Elmer Fudd. Let's see. I mean, I guess you could call Casper a human character, even though he's a ghost. Little Audrey, Inspector Willoughby from Walter Lantz. Let's see. Oh, Mickey Mouse as in terms of the talking, the Mr. Magoo series won accolades for UVA. Two Magoo cartoons won the Academy Award for Best Short Subject Cartoons when Magoo Flew in 1954 and Magoo's Puddle Jumper, 1956. UPA scored another hit with Gerald McBoing Boing, 1950, based on a record by Dr. Seuss. Gerald McBoing Boing won UPA Academy Award in 1950. Gerald McBoing Boing, just in case those of you who may not know, Gerald McBoing Boing was basically a little boy who, I guess he was about 5-6 years old. The only sounds he could really make were boing boing. That was the only sound that would ever come out of his mouth, apparently. So, quite an endearing character with a number of different adaptations over the years. Let's see now. All right. UPA cartoons would receive a total of 15 Oscar nominations between 1949 and 1959. In December of 1950, UPA announced plans for a feature-length film based on the work of cartoonist and humorist James Thurber. The film was to combine live action and animation, but tentatively titled Men, Women, and Dogs. but it was never completed. In parentheses, only one of Thurber pieces intended for this feature, The Unicorn in the Garden, was eventually released as a short subject, unparenthesed. Shorts such as The Telltale Heart and Rudy Toot Toot featured striking, sophisticated designs unlike anything offered by competing studios. The, in quotes here, UPA style began to influence significant changes in other major animation studios, including Warner Brothers, MGM, famous studios, who, of course, was contracted to Paramount, and even Disney, ushering in a new era of experimentation. Famous studios, of course, in the 50s and 60s, were giving us, of course, the Popeye cartoons, as well as many of the Harvey Toon characters like Casper the Friendly Ghost, Little Audrey, Baby Huey, Herman and Catnip, and Modern Madcaps. Turning to television. In 1955, Stephen Bosustow secured a CBS contract for UPA to produce a television series, the Boing Boing Show, aka Gerald McBoing Boing Show, which premiered in December 1956, supervised by Bob Cannon. This production offered an array of styles that brought new talent to the studio, such as Ernest Pintoff, Fred Crippen, Jimmy Murakami, Richard Williams, George Durning, Mel Levin, Aurelius Battaglia, and John Whitney, among others. However, audiences did not embrace UPA's experiment in television entertainment. As a result, the show vanished from the airwaves in 1958. Further, as the major Hollywood studios began cutting back and shutting down their short film divisions. Remember, in the 50s, as Americans were getting more and more, as television was becoming more and more of a thing, there was a transition going on between producing the short subjects and transitioning more to television style production. You did have a number of series come out in the 50s and early 60s where you had some shows where they'd have, you'd still have like the 7-minute short, but 7 to 8 minute shorts, but they would usually be 2 or 3 as part of a half-hour show usually. Let's see. UPA was in financial straits, and Steve Bosustow sold the studio to a producer named Henry G. Saperstein. Saperstein turned UPA's focus to television to sustain the studio. UPA adapted Mr. Magoo for television and produced another series based on the comic strip Dick Tracy. Yeah, I believe those came out in the early 60s, as I recall. UPA was forced to churn out cartoons at a far greater quantity than the studio had done for theatrical. Yeah, because theatrical releases would only be, you'd only release maybe 4 to 6 a year, theatricals, whereas you needed constant content coming out for the television series, so that was kind of the thing there. Or even CBS television series. Despite this, however, quality was languishing, and UPA's reputation as an artistic innovator faded. I do need to step away from the computer for a moment. One gets more light in here, but also to take care of something. So I'll be right back. But what I will do while I'm gone, I'll put some music on, and hopefully you guys will enjoy the music here. And I'll be right back. I'm back. Sorry about that. Let's get back to the history of UPA here. I'm back on. Let's see. UBA's style of limited animation was adopted by other animation studios, especially by television cartoon studios such as Hanna-Barbera Productions, which of course became a major player in this from the 60s through the early 90s. However, this procedure was generally implemented as a cost-cutting measure rather than an artistic choice that UPA originally intended. A plethora of low-budget, cheaply made cartoons over the next 20 years effectively reduced television animation to a commodity, partly popularizing the notion of animation as being made only for children rather than a medium for any age group to enjoy. In parentheses, with the exception of shows like The Flintstones, Top Cat, Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, um, you know, The Jetsons, and notoriously going against UPA's original goal to expand the boundaries of animation and create a new style of medium for the medium. One bright moment in the UPA television era came with Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol in 1962, a classic that I'm sure many of us have seen over the years, time and time again. It's one of the Christmas specials I always look forward to watching. Mr. Magoo in the role of Ebenezer Scrooge, basically, um, which inspired the format of Magoo's next television endeavor, the 1964 series, The Famous Adventures of Mr. Magoo. Christmas Carol captures the spirit of Charles Dickens' 1843 book and is considered a holiday classic, ranking alongside A Charlie Brown Christmas, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and of course my favorite, Yogi's First Christmas. Of course, they don't say that here, but that's my personal favorite. UPA produced only 2 full-length feature films in their tenure, a 1959 feature starring Mr. Magoo entitled 1001 Arabian Nights, directed by ex-Disney animator Jack Kinney, and Gay Paris in 1962. Another movie I watched a lot when I was a kid, when it was on TV a lot. I gotta explain that one. Written by Chuck Jones and his wife Dorothy, and directed by a friend of Jones, Abe Levito. Abe Levito, who would, of course, be a big name in the 60s. He'd direct a lot of, MGM shorts for, like Tom and Jerry and all that. So, all right. So, next part here. Abandoning animation and Toho. All right. So, Saperstein kept UPA afloat in the 1960s and beyond by abandoning animation production completely after the animation studio closed permanently in 1970 and sold off UPA's library of cartoons, although the studio retained the licenses and copyrights on Mr. Magoo, Gerald McBoing, and other UPA characters. This led to UPA contracting with DePatie Frayling Enterprises Studio to produce a new animated series called What's New, Mr. Magoo in September 1977. Of course, DePatie Frayling was the same company. They also did work for Warner Brothers there in the late 60s after Warner Brothers had closed down its cartoon studio in 1963, as we've noted before here. DePatie Frayling also was the company that, of course, produced a lot of the Pink Panther cartoons in the late 60s, or Pink Panther, Anna the Aardvark, the Inspector, among others. Let's see. Columbia Pictures retained ownership of UPA's theatrical cartoons. The studio's TV cartoon library was licensed by Classic Media in New York and then in 2007 merged into entertainment rights in London. In 1970, Saperstein led UPA into a contract with Toho Company Limited of Japan to distribute its quote unquote giant monster, uh, see kaiju and tokusatsu movies in America. A lot of basically um, Godzilla primarily. Also, many of the giant robot movies like Mazinger Z and all that. Um, so they went from being a studio to being a distributor. Um, Theatrical releases and especially TV syndication of the Toho monster movies created a new cult movie market for Japanese monster movies, and long-running television movie syndication packages, such as Creature Double Feature, exposed Toho movie monsters to young American audiences um, who embraced and helped them maintain their popularity throughout the 1970s, which of course would probably eventually lead to bigger interest in anime as well. Because remember, you had, of course, some of the animated adaptations of some of these movies as well, characters. When Toho began producing a new generation of monster movies in the late 1980s, beginning with Godzilla in 1985, UPA capitalized on its Toho contract and helped introduce the new kaiju features into the Western world. Because of its long association with Toho, UPA is better known to cult movie fans today as Toho's American distributor rather than a pioneer in animated cartoons, but the legacy of UPA is an important chapter in the history of American animation. UPA continued to license the American library of Godzilla movies through 2017, when the rights were transferred to Janus Films. UPA's contract with Toho also resulted in Saperstein producing Woody Allen's first feature film, What's Up, Tiger Lily? Henry Saperstein died in 1998. On January 1st, 2000, UPA shuttered its operations, with the assets sold by the Saperstein family, which would later result in the founding of Classic Media in May 2000. Classic Media, of course, basically licenses and distributes these materials in question. On July 23rd, 2012, DreamWorks Animation purchased Classic Media for $155 million. As a result, UPA is now owned by DreamWorks Animation, which would be acquired by NBC Universal in 2016, although DreamWorks Animation and later Universal Studios now owns the ancillary rights to most of the UPA library. UPA itself, with DreamWorks Animation Universal, continues to hold the licensing rights to Mr. Magoo, and Saperstein was executive producer to Disney's unsuccessful live-action feature Mr. Magoo in 1997. Some theatrical feature films are owned by other third-party companies. For example, Warner Brothers Discovery currently owns Gay Paris, and the Walt Disney Company owns the 1997 Mr. Magoo film adaptation. Let's see. I don't think. we don't necessarily need to know that. Oh, the legacy now of UPA. Let's look at that. Let's see, what time is it now? 37 minutes. So we're maybe. Did Elk finish WandaVision? I don't know. Have to ask him there. Good night, Spoon. If you haven't already, if you can help out by liking, sharing the screen, see if we get some more friendly people in here to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if any you are talking about grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. We're going over the history of United Productions of America, also known as UPA tonight. So that's what we're doing here tonight. So the legacy here of UPA. UPA Pictures' legacy in the history of animation has largely been overshadowed by the commercial success and availability of cartoon libraries of Warner Brothers, MGM, and Disney. Well, you can now, for those in the States here, you can now watch a lot of the UPA library on MeTV Tunes. They have a lot of the, a lot of the UPA shorts from Mr. Magoo, Gerald McBoing Boing, Fox and the Crow, Color Rhapsodies, all that. So they do have a lot of the Columbia library there. So nonetheless, UPA had a significant impact on animation style, content, and technique, and its innovations were recognized and adopted by the other major animation studios and independent filmmakers all over the world, as UPA pioneered the technique of limited animation. Although this style of animation came to be widely used in the 1960s and 70s as a cost-cutting measure, it was originally intended as a stylistic alternative to the growing trend, particularly at Disney, in parentheses there, of recreating cinematic realism in animated films. UPA was also a central influence in the foundation of the Zagreb School of Animated Films in the 1950s. Animators in Yugoslavia were heavily impacted by UPA's work. And it's kind of funny how they talk about that because MGM also did that a bit in terms of, like Gene Deitch directed a lot of the MGM cartoons that came out of the 60s that were animated over in Czechoslovakia. So. All right. So, anyways, as we continue on with what we're going over here. Let's see. Oh yeah, impacted by UPA's work on the Four Poster, 1952, a live-action film with animation directed by John Hubley in his final project at UPA. Both Gerald McBoing and The Telltale Heart were inducted into the National Film Registry. So now we can go over kind of the list of UPA cartoons here. Let's see. The following is a listing of UPA. Let's see. So one of their first shorts in 1948 was Robert Hoodlum, as I mentioned before, won an Academy Award nominee, as well as the Magic Flute in 1949. The Robert Hoodlum one was the Fox and Crow feature. You had you had Trouble in Indemnity, Joe McBoing Boing in 1950, Academy Award winner. 1951, you had The Family Circus, Barefaced Flatfoot. You had Rudy Toot Toot was another Academy Award. So let's see. Rudy Toot Toot. Did that feature anybody of note? Let's see. Nope. Nobody of any real note there. 1952, that was, of course, the year that gave us Pink and Blue Blues, which was a Mr. Magoo cartoon, and Madeline, actually one of the first animated adaptations of Madeline. In this case, a short. And I recently actually saw that short on Totally Tuned In on MeTV Tunes. Kind of interesting. You had, of course, the Unicorn and Garden, British Academy of Film Award nominee, as well as another Academy Award nominee in The Telltale Heart. Magoo Goes Skiing submitted and screened at the 26th Academy Awards for an Oscar consideration, but wasn't nominated. And then yet, when Magoo Flew was an Academy Award winner. Magoo Makes News submitted and screened at the 28th Academy Award for an Oscar consideration, but was not nominated. Gerald McBoing Boing on Planet Moo, another Academy Award nominee. The Jaywalker, another Academy Award nominee. Magoo's Puddle Jumper, Academy Award winner. Again, of course, Mr. Magoo and Joe McBoing were probably the two most famous. Also, the Fox and Crow is up there in the level of fame as well. Magoo's Private War, which was submitted and screened at the 30th Academy Awards, but wasn't nominated. Trees and Jamaica Daddy, which was a Hat and Ham, I believe, short or feature. Academy Award nominee. Let's see. Sailing the Village Band, Magoo's 3-Point Landing. Picnics Are Fun, and Dino Serenade. Magoo Meets Boing Boing, the noise-making boy, later released on the television series Mr. Magoo, retitled Magoo Meets McBoing Boing. Submitted. So you even had some crossover here too. 1960, I Was a Teenage Magoo. Let's see, Mr. Magoo, Frankenstein, both released on the TV series eventually. Of course, the two features they talked about, 1001 Arabian Nights in 1959, released by Columbia Pictures, and then Gay Paris, released by Warner Brothers. Here are some other titles. Television filmography currently owned by Classic Media. The Roy Rogers Show, 1951 to 1957. More of a live action show, obviously. Let's see, Gerald McBoing Boing, 1956-57. Mr. Magoo. The Dick Tracy Show in 61-62. The Famous Adventures of Mr. Magoo, 1964-65. And then What's New, Mr. Magoo, licensed and co-produced by the Patty Frailing. Of course, the specials are Mr. Sun and Mr. Magoo's Christmas Special. These are probably some of the like wartime, some of the government films they produced here. Man Alive, all that. So that's all we got for you in terms of the history of UPA. So hopefully you found this the magic flute is Masonic. Yeah. Well, anyways, so with that, now we're up to 47 minutes here, so that took a good chunk of time. So what we're going to do now, of course, we're going to move on to the wrestling wrap up here. Go over some of the, we're obviously going to go over, of course, last night's Raw results. Talk about what to look forward to tonight on um, on NXT. Go over some, of course, WWE and AEW news as well. So last night's Monday Night Raw, which took place from the Toyota Arena in Ontario, California, opened up with a one-on-one match singles match between Sami Zayn and Ludwig Kaiser, in which Sami Zayn defeated Ludwig Kaiser, furthering the Zayn's push to make himself look like a top contender to Gunther, continuing their rivalry. Then, of course, you had Dragon Lee defeat Carlito in another battle between the LWO and Judgment Day. The Damage Control duo of Io Sky and Kairi Sane defeated the former women's tag team champions Unholy Union of Isla Dawn and Alba Fire. The Creed brothers, representing American Made, with Chad Gable and Ivy Nile in their corner, defeated the New Day of Kobe Kingston and Xavier Woods as that team disintegration continues, as what people apparently looking forward to is the potential heel turn by Xavier Woods. And then the main event saw Jey Uso defeat Braun Breaker for the WWE Intercontinental title, and what many are believing is a way for them to possibly turn Braun Breaker into a face. So that's all that happened on last night's. Now, as we look forward to tonight's show, as it were, tonight's NXT show. And I can find the cursor, of course. On tonight's NXT show, coming from the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida, on the USA Network, TNA's Rosemary will be teaming with Wendy Chu to take on Brinley Reese and Carmen Petrovich. Aura Mensa takes on Lexis King. Hank and Tank, Hank Walker and Tank Ledger take on Yoshi of the Good Brothers of Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows. Ridge Holland takes on Riley Osborne. And then in a match for the NXT Women's North American title, Kalani Jordan defends the title against Ren Sinclair. As this is all, of course, in preparation for a week from this Saturday's Bad Blood pay-per-view, and already signed for Bad Blood, coming on the State Farm Arena on October 5th, which will be broadcast on the WWE Network. Already signed for the match for the night. Liv Morgan defends the Women's World title against Rhea Ripley in a match in which Dominique Mysterio will be suspended in a shark cage over the ring. In a Hell in a Cell match, CM Punk and Drew McIntyre look to settle their rivalry once and for all. In a match for the WWE Women's title, Nia Jax will be hasn't been announced yet who she'll be defending against, but she will be defending title against somebody at Bad Blood. Finn Balor takes on Damian Priest. And the main event will see Universal Champion Cody WWE and WWE Universal Champion Cody Rhodes teaming with Roman Reigns take on the Bloodline members of Jacob Fatu and Solo Sikoa. And in some other WWE news, of course, the Vince McMahon documentary from Netflix will be coming out soon. Apparently, there are some in the WWE who are not happy about that, including Vince himself, as it's being viewed as a hatchet job. Also, in other WWE news, apparently WWE tried to copyright strike a video that AEW had put up, apparently claiming that they had owned certain footage from video package they put together for Niall McGuinness. He's promoting his he was promoting his match with Bryan Danielson here on tomorrow night's Grand Slam. Some of the ROH footage they tried to lay claim to, claiming claiming rights to the Seth Rollins footage, who wrestled in Ring of Honor as Tyler Black, of course. And speaking of AEW, as we utilize that as a segue, as it were, coming up on tomorrow night's Dynamite, as soon as I can pull that up here. Coming up on tomorrow night's AEW Dynamite, as soon as I get that. As tomorrow night's Grand Slam will be happening from Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York City. On tomorrow night, they have a pretty stacked card tomorrow night, as Mariah May will be defending the AEW Women's World Title against Yuka Sakazaki. The Young Bucks of Matthew Nicholas Jackson, the executive VPs, will be defending the AEW World Tag Team titles against Kyle Fletcher and AEW International Champion Will Ospreay, as they're reforming the United Empire for a bit here. And a match for Darby Allin's number one contendership to the AEW World Title. Jon Moxley challenges him for that shot to see who will go on to Wrestle Dream to challenge Bryan Danielson, I believe is when they said, and pending if he's cleared to wrestle, if Bryan Danielson is cleared to wrestle, AEW World Champion Bryan Danielson will be taking on his old Ring of Honor rival Nigel McGuinness one-on-one in what promises to be the final showdown between the two, and what they're both hoping will settle the feud once and for all. So that's coming up on tomorrow night's Dynamite. So now we're done with the wrestling wrap-up. So now we can go ahead and get ready to... So now with today being Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. So 9/24/24, as it were. Let's take a look back at this day in each history. So, all right. So first off, I'm going to head back 40 years ago, and on this date 40 years ago today, back in 1984. Date in 1984. I believe probably on a house show somewhere. Greg Valentine defeated Tito Santana in London, Ontario, Canada, for the WWF Intercontinental Championship. So on this day, 40 years ago today, Greg Valentine defeated Tito Santana to become the WWF Intercontinental Championship in London, Ontario, Canada. On this day in 1994, 30 years ago today, the following shows premiered on this date 30 years ago today. Nelvana's Free Willy premiered on ABC on this date back in 1994, as well as Marvel's 1994, as part of the Action Hour, the 1994 versions of Fantastic Four and Iron Man, both premiered in syndication on this date back in 1994. So on this date in 1994, Nelvana's Free Willy premiered on ABC, and in syndication, Marvel Animation's Iron Man and Fantastic Four, both the 1994 series, premiered on this date back in 1994. And 1994 is just so nice that we're going to hit it twice. There's also, on this date in 1994, on this date in 1994, Studio Dean's OVA, You're Under Arrest OVA from Studio Dean, was released on this date back in 1994, 30 years ago today. So 30 years ago today, Studio Dean's You're Under Arrest OVA was released on this date back in 1994. And finally, moving ahead to 2014, which was 10 years ago today. On this date 10 years ago today, DC, the 25th issue of Batman Eternal from DC went on sale on this date back in 2014. Sold for $2.99 with 32 pages. The story was City of Whispers, plotted by Scott Snyder, written by James Tynion IV. R.M. Gora did the art. Lettering done by Steve Wands, and Julia Brusico did the coloring. So on this date, 10 years ago today, the 25th issue of Batman Eternal from DC went on sale on newsstands. So with that, I hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight. I hope everybody hope you all got a bit out of it. Of course, we'll be back here with more Niche News tomorrow, hopefully. Tonight there was only like one real short article. That's why I went with the whole history of the UPA. Something I've been thinking about for a while, and I figured the next time I would, had kind of a night that was a slow news night, I'd do that. So that's what I did. Also, this Friday, I'll be joined, of course, by RJ Carter from Critical Blast. We'll be looking back. To comics that went on sale in March of 1940. We're looking at comics that went on sale from Prize Publications, most notably Prize Comics Volume 1, Issue 3. So with that, I thank you. I thank you for being here tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. And I hope to see you back here tomorrow. Bye.